Beneath the streets we walk every day, beneath skyscrapers, highways, and crowded cities, lie the remains of forgotten worlds. Entire civilizations built temples, roads, and monuments where modern people now live, then vanished, leaving their stories buried under layers of time. Tonight we're uncovering the incredible truth about the civilizations hidden beneath modern cities. From lost capitals sealed beneath concrete to ancient kingdoms resting under millions of people's feet, these hidden worlds reveal a past far stranger than most imagine. But before we descend beneath the surface, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more journeys into history's greatest mysteries. Now dim the light, settle in, and let's explore the civilizations that never truly disappeared. They were simply buried beneath the cities of today. A construction crew cuts through the pavement of a busy modern street. Traffic passes overhead. Glass towers reflect sunlight across crowded sidewalks. Thousands of people move through the city without noticing anything unusual. Then, several meters below the surface, a wall appears. It is not part of any modern building. Its stones are worn smooth by centuries. A doorway emerges next. Beneath that, fragments of pottery. Beneath those traces of hearths where fires once burned. Suddenly, the familiar city above seems less permanent than it did a few hours earlier. The discovery is not unique. Similar moments happen across the world. Workers digging foundations encounter forgotten streets. Subway projects uncover buried temples. Sewer repairs expose ancient roads. Parking garages reveal lost houses. Entire neighborhoods emerge unexpectedly from the ground beneath some of humanity's largest cities. What appears to be solid urban reality is often only the latest layer in a much deeper story. Many people imagine lost civilizations as distant ruins hidden in deserts, swallowed by jungles, or abandoned on remote islands. Popular imagination places vanished worlds far away from modern life. Yet some of the most remarkable lost cities lie directly beneath places where millions of people live and work every day. Ancient capitals, forgotten markets, collapsed palaces, buried homes, and vanished neighborhoods remain preserved beneath apartment blocks, office towers, train stations, and highways. The strange reality is that cities possess a unique relationship with time. Unlike many settlements that are abandoned and left behind, successful cities tend to attract more people generation after generation. Buildings age and collapse. Fires destroy districts. Floods reshape neighborhoods. Rulers construct new monuments. Old structures become inconvenient. Roads are widened. Foundations are raised. Entire districts are rebuilt. Instead of moving elsewhere, populations often remain where they are. The city survives by continuously transforming itself. As this process repeats across centuries, older layers gradually disappear beneath newer ones. Streets rise, floors are rebuilt higher, rubble accumulates, construction debris fills abandoned spaces, earth and sediment settle over forgotten structures. What was once ground level eventually becomes buried several meters underground. A city slowly creates its own archaeological archive. The process is so gradual that no single generation fully notices what is happening. A collapsed building becomes a convenient foundation for another structure. A damaged road is repaired rather than removed. A ruined district is leveled and rebuilt. Each decision appears practical in the moment. Over hundreds or thousands of years, however, these small actions transform living cities into vertical histories. In some places, the accumulated layers become astonishingly deep. Beneath modern streets lie older streets. Beneath those are even older roads. Entire sequences of human occupations stack one upon another like pages in an immense book. Every layer preserves evidence of different people, different beliefs, different technologies, and different ways of understanding the world. The idea challenges the common image of history as a straight line moving steadily forward. The physical reality of many cities is not horizontal but vertical. The past does not remain behind, it remains below. Archaeologists sometimes describe cities as archives written in soil and stone. Unlike written records, these archives cannot be edited after the fact. A broken pot remains broken. A burned building preserves evidence of fire. Food scraps reveal diets. Buried coins indicate trade networks. Foundations show how people organize space. Even garbage becomes valuable evidence. Objects discarded by one generation often become treasures for another. Yet the deeper mystery is not simply that ancient remains survive underground. The more intriguing question is why so many civilizations become invisible while continuing to exist beneath the very places that replaced them. Imagine standing in a crowded city square. Cafes are full, cars pass nearby. Digital advertisements flash across giant screens. Beneath the pavement might lie a medieval marketplace. Beneath that could be a Roman road. Beneath that perhaps an Iron Age settlement. Each generation believed its world was real and immediate. Each generation built structures intended to endure. Each generation filled its streets with conversations, ambitions, fears, celebrations, and daily routines. Most of those people are forgotten now. Their names vanished long ago. Their houses collapsed. Their governments disappeared. Their languages changed or died. Yet physical traces remain surprisingly close. Sometimes only a few meters separate the modern world from communities that lived centuries or even millennia earlier. This layered reality becomes especially striking when archaeologists uncover evidence of ordinary life. Grand monuments attract attention, but ordinary homes often reveal far more about the people who once occupied them. A cooking pot left beside a hearth. Children's toys abandoned in a corner. Animal bones discarded after meals. Worn pathways across a courtyard. Such details transform distant history into something more recognizable. The buried cities beneath modern urban centers are not simply collections of ruins. They are records of countless individual lives. Merchants negotiated prices there. Families gathered around evening fires. Craftsmen worked long hours shaping tools and ornaments. Children played in streets that eventually disappeared beneath layers of stone and earth. Political leaders rose and fell. Religions spread and faded. Entire societies transformed while the ground beneath them slowly accumulated traces of their existence. What survives in the record suggests that this pattern has repeated throughout much of human history. Cities emerge because certain locations offer advantages. Rivers provide water and transportation. Harbors connect trade routes. Fertile land supports populations. Strategic positions encourage defense and commerce. Once established, these advantages often remain valuable for centuries. As a result, new generations repeatedly choose the same locations. The consequence is one of the great paradoxes of civilization. The most successful cities frequently become the best places to lose earlier civilizations. Continuous occupation protects a location from complete abandonment, yet that same occupation buries the evidence of previous worlds beneath ever-growing layers of development. Modern technology has begun revealing just how extensive these hidden landscapes may be. Ground-penetrating radar, underground imaging, rescue archaeology, and large-scale excavations increasingly expose forgotten districts beneath contemporary urban environments. Each discovery expands the timeline of places people thought they already understood, and sometimes the findings are extraordinary. Entire roads appear where no records mention them. Lost temples emerge beneath apartment complexes. Ancient water systems continue functioning long after the societies that built them disappear. In some cities, archaeologists realize that what appears modern is merely the latest chapter in a story stretching back thousands of years. The deeper researchers look, the more unsettling the pattern becomes. Modern civilization is not standing beside the ancient world. In many places, it is standing directly on top of it. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy. Because the story of hidden civilizations is not really about ruins. It is about continuity. It is about how cities survive by constantly reinventing themselves. And it is about how the living often walk unknowingly above entire worlds that refuse to disappear completely, waiting patiently beneath stone, concrete and steel for the moment when history breaks through the surface once again. The buried wall uncovered beneath a modern street does not appear there by accident. It exists because cities possess a remarkable habit rarely seen elsewhere in human history. They grow, decline, burn, flood, rebuild, expand and transform, yet they often remain rooted to the same patch of ground. The result is a landscape where centuries accumulate vertically, instead of spreading outward, creating hidden layers of civilization beneath the feet of later generations. To understand how entire worlds become buried beneath modern cities, it helps to imagine a settlement at the beginning of its life. A group of people establishes homes near a river crossing a protected harbour, fertile farmland or a strategic hill. The location offers advantages. Trade routes pass nearby. Water is accessible. Food can be produced or imported. Over time, the settlement grows. At first, the changes seem modest. Houses are repaired, roads are improved, defensive walls are expanded. A small marketplace attracts merchants. New buildings replace old ones. Every generation alters the landscape slightly. Most people living there never imagine they are creating the foundations of a future archaeological site. Then disaster strikes. A fire sweeps through part of the settlement. An earthquake damages buildings. Floodwaters deposit thick layers of mud. Warfare leaves neighborhoods in ruins. Economic decline causes entire districts to be abandoned. In many cases, the simplest response is not to remove every trace of destruction. Instead, survivors level the debris and build again. This practical decision becomes one of the most important forces shaping urban history. Removing thousands of tons of rubble requires enormous labor. Reusing existing foundations often saves time and resources. Collapsed structures provide convenient fill material. Damaged walls become bases for new construction. Streets are raised slightly to improve drainage. Small adjustments accumulate with each rebuilding phase. After centuries, the original ground level begins to disappear. Archaeologists have observed this process in cities across multiple continents. The phenomenon is so common that many ancient urban centres resemble layered cakes when viewed in excavation trenches. Distinct occupation levels reveal different periods of history stacked one above another. A visitor standing on a modern sidewalk may unknowingly be several meters above the surface, walked by earlier inhabitants. The process becomes especially dramatic in places occupied continuously for long periods. Every generation inherits not empty land but the physical remains of previous generations. Cities become self-recycling environments. Stones from temples are reused in houses. Bricks from old walls appear in new fortifications. Foundations support entirely different structures centuries later. Sometimes the relationship between old and new becomes almost surreal. An ancient road disappears beneath later construction. Centuries pass. The road is forgotten. Then modern engineers excavating for utilities uncover the original paving stones. Suddenly, two worlds separated by vast stretches of time occupy the same physical space. The modern street may even follow nearly the same route chosen by planners thousands of years earlier. Human behavior contributes to this layering in unexpected ways. Every day produces waste. Broken pottery, damaged tools, food remains, construction debris, and discarded household items accumulate over time. In ancient cities, organized waste removal was often limited. Refuse might be dumped into abandoned areas used to level uneven ground, or incorporated into construction projects. These seemingly insignificant activities gradually alter the landscape. A few centimeters of accumulated material each generation may not seem important. Over hundreds or thousands of years, however, the effect becomes substantial. Entire neighborhoods slowly rise above their original elevations. Flooding adds another layer to the story. Rivers have attracted settlements throughout history because they provide transportation water and fertile soil, yet rivers also deposit sediment. Major floods can cover urban districts with thick layers of mud and silt. Repeated flooding raises ground levels naturally while simultaneously preserving older structures beneath protective deposits. The same process occurs in coastal regions. Storm surges, changing shorelines, and sediment accumulation reshape urban landscapes over long periods. Harbours that once sat directly on the water may eventually find themselves far inland. Ancient waterfronts disappear beneath newer construction while the coastline itself evolves. Even prosperity contributes to burial. Successful cities attract investment. Wealth encourages construction. Larger buildings require stronger foundations. New infrastructure demands extensive modification of existing landscapes. Markets expand. Public buildings multiply. Defensive systems become more elaborate. Every improvement adds material to the urban environment. Ironically, the more successful a city becomes, the greater the likelihood that earlier versions of the city will vanish beneath later development. This process explains why some of the world's most historically significant locations remain difficult to fully excavate. The ancient city is not sitting in an empty field waiting to be uncovered. It exists beneath a living city filled with homes, businesses, roads, and essential infrastructure. Archaeologists often have access only to small windows into the past, created by construction projects or carefully planned excavations. The evidence remains incomplete because much of the record is literally inaccessible. Entire districts may survive beneath modern neighborhoods that cannot realistically be removed for archaeological investigation. Scholars often know hidden structures exist but lack the opportunity to study them fully. This limitation creates one of the great frustrations of urban archaeology. Every new excavation answers some questions while revealing countless others. A buried wall suggests a larger building. A section of roadway hints at an entire transportation network. A cluster of artifacts points toward neighborhoods that remain concealed beyond the excavation area. Cities frequently preserve evidence of multiple civilizations occupying the same location. One society builds upon another. New rulers reshape existing urban spaces. Religious structures are converted to different purposes. Languages change. Political systems evolve. Yet the location remains active. The result is not simply one buried city, but many. A single excavation trench can sometimes reveal centuries of continuous human occupation, compressed into a relatively small space. Roman remains may sit above earlier settlements. Medieval construction may cover Roman foundations. Modern infrastructure may cut through all of them. The trench becomes a vertical timeline of human activity. What survives in the record suggests that this pattern has occurred repeatedly wherever urban life flourishes for long periods. The phenomenon is not limited to one civilization or one region. It appears in Europe, Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and the Americas. Different cultures, technologies, and belief systems all contribute to the same gradual accumulation of history beneath the surface. As archaeologists continue investigating these layered environments, a striking realization emerges. Modern cities are not isolated creations of the present. They are the latest expressions of places shaped by thousands of years of human decisions. Beneath familiar streets lie earlier maps of the same landscape. Beneath modern foundations rest the ambitions of forgotten builders. Beneath contemporary skylines survive traces of worlds that once seemed just as permanent as our own. And nowhere does this long accumulation of buried history become more dramatic than in the ancient capitals where empires rose, ruled vast territories and left behind layers so deep that entire civilizations now sleep beneath the foundations of modern life. Few places demonstrate the hidden depth of urban history more clearly than the ancient capitals of the world. Long before modern skylines, highways, and apartment blocks appeared, certain locations drew people again and again. They became centers of trade power, religion, administration, and culture. Kingdoms expanded from them. Empires governed vast territories through them. Generations invested enormous resources into their growth. Yet the capitals that survive today are often only the newest versions of cities whose histories extend far deeper underground. Standing in one of these cities can create a strange illusion. The visible landscape appears complete. Buildings occupy every available space. Streets pulse with activity. Government institutions, businesses, and homes define the modern environment. Yet beneath that familiar surface lies another city, and beneath that another and sometimes another still. The phenomenon is especially striking because capitals rarely remain static. Political power attracts construction on a massive scale. Rulers seek monuments that project authority. Religious institutions build sacred complexes. Merchants establish markets. Population growth drives expansion. Every period leaves its mark on the urban fabric. Later generations often modify or erase earlier structures, while simultaneously preserving fragments of them beneath new construction. The result resembles a vast archaeological palimpsest, a document written, erased, and rewritten countless times, yet never completely losing its earlier text. In many ancient capitals, archaeologists encounter evidence of continuous occupation stretching back thousands of years. The same strategic advantages that attracted early settlers continue attracting later populations. Access to rivers, fertile land trade routes, and defensible terrain remains valuable across centuries. As dynasties rise and fall, the location itself retains its importance. One of the most revealing aspects of these buried capitals is how they challenge common assumptions about historical change. History is often imagined as a sequence of separate civilizations replacing one another. The archaeological reality is usually more complex. New societies frequently inherit landscapes already shaped by earlier peoples. Roads remain useful. Water systems continue functioning. Defensive positions retain strategic value. Even when political authority changes completely, much of the underlying urban structure survives. Sometimes the continuity is obvious. A new palace rises where an older palace once stood. A marketplace continues operating in roughly the same location for centuries. Religious sites remain sacred despite changes in belief systems. Other times the continuity is subtle. Property boundaries established long ago influence later development. Ancient routes become modern streets. Forgotten infrastructure shapes future construction decisions. The deeper researchers investigate, the more interconnected different periods of history appear. Ancient capitals also preserve evidence of extraordinary human concentration. Large populations generate enormous quantities of material. Buildings are constructed, repaired, expanded, abandoned, demolished, and rebuilt. Everyday activities leave behind countless traces. Broken tools, fragments of pottery food, remains, coins, ornaments, and household objects accumulate over time. These artifacts create a remarkably detailed record of urban life. What survives in the archaeological record often reveals aspects of history absent from official chronicles. Kings and emperors dominate written accounts, but buried neighborhoods tell different stories. They reveal the lives of labourers, merchants, artisans, migrants, and families whose names never entered historical texts. A discarded cooking vessel may reveal trade connections. Animal bones may indicate dietary habits. Workshop remains can expose entire industries previously unknown to historians. In some cases, archaeology transforms understanding of a city's origins. Earlier generations often believed their cities began at a particular moment described in historical records. Excavations sometimes reveal occupation extending much further into the past. Settlements that appeared modest in written sources emerge as significant urban centres. Entire phases of development become visible for the first time. The evidence remains incomplete, however. Ancient capitals present unique challenges for archaeologists. Unlike abandoned sites, they remain densely populated. Excavations must coexist with modern infrastructure. Subways, utilities, roads, and buildings limit access to buried layers. Researchers frequently investigate only small sections at a time, piecing together larger patterns from fragmented evidence. This situation creates an unusual relationship between knowledge and uncertainty. Archaeologists know that immense quantities of evidence remain hidden beneath modern cities, yet much of it may remain inaccessible for generations. Every construction project has the potential to reveal unexpected discoveries. Every excavation opens a small window into a much larger buried landscape. Some findings are astonishing in their scale. Entire districts emerge beneath modern neighbourhoods. Networks of streets appear where none were expected. Massive public buildings reveal forgotten phases of urban development. Ancient water systems continue running centuries after their creators vanished. Storage facilities preserve traces of trade that connected distant regions. Fortifications expose periods of conflict long absent from historical memory. These discoveries often demonstrate how resilient cities can be. Political collapse does not always result in abandonment. Natural disasters may devastate communities without ending occupation. Economic decline can reduce population dramatically while leaving a settlement alive. Cities adapt, contract, expand, and reinvent themselves. Yet resilience has a paradoxical consequence. The survival of the city often contributes to the disappearance of earlier versions of itself. Every rebuilding project obscures part of the past. Every new foundation cuts into older layers. Every effort to modernize transforms the archaeological record. The city survives precisely because it changes. The hidden civilization beneath modern streets exists because later generations continued living there rather than leaving. This paradox becomes especially visible in places where capitals endured for centuries as centers of political power. Layers of administration, commerce, religion, and daily life accumulate with remarkable density. A modern government building may stand above medieval structures. Those structures may rest upon Roman remains. Beneath them could lie even older settlements predating recorded history in the region. No single explanation fully accounts for the complexity of these urban sequences. Human decisions, environmental changes, disasters, economic forces, and political transformations all contribute. The resulting landscape becomes a compressed record of civilization itself. Perhaps the most remarkable realization is that many of these buried capitals remain largely unexplored. Archaeologists have uncovered enough evidence to demonstrate their extraordinary depth, yet vast portions remain hidden. Modern life continues above them. People shop, work, commute, and socialize while ancient walls, forgotten roads, and lost neighborhoods rest only a short distance below. Among all the ancient capitals layered beneath modern populations, one city stands apart. Its buried world contains traces of republics, emperors, invasions, religious transformations, and nearly 3,000 years of continuous occupation. Few places illustrate the phenomenon of cities built upon cities more dramatically. To understand how entire civilizations can survive beneath a living metropolis, it becomes necessary to descend beneath the streets of Rome itself, where the modern city rests atop one of the deepest and most complex archaeological landscapes on Earth. The modern streets of Rome appear ancient by contemporary standards. Stone churches rise above narrow lanes, ruins stand beside busy roads, fragments of the classical world remain visible throughout the city. Yet even this famous landscape reveals only part of the story. Beneath the Rome that visitors see today lies another Rome. Beneath that lies yet another. In some places, centuries of rebuilding have created an underground world so extensive that archaeologists continue uncovering new discoveries after generations of research. Walking through Rome often means moving across multiple layers of history at once. A person may stand in a medieval square constructed above Roman structures, which themselves occupy ground once used by earlier communities. The city is not merely old, it is layered. Every era has left material behind, and every era has built upon what came before. The process begins long before Rome becomes an empire. Small settlements occupy the hills overlooking the Tiber River. These early communities take advantage of defensible terrain, access to water, and connections between inland and coastal regions. Over time, separate settlements merge into a larger urban centre. Population grows, trade expands, political authority becomes increasingly centralised. As Rome develops, construction accelerates. Temples rise, roads spread outward, public buildings multiply, markets attract merchants from distant regions. Wealth flowing into the city finances increasingly ambitious projects. Stone replaces simpler materials. Monumental architecture becomes a visible expression of power. Every generation modifies the urban landscape. The growth of Rome eventually reaches a scale rarely seen in the ancient world. At its height, the city may have housed more than 1 million inhabitants. Supplying such a population requires vast infrastructure. Aqueducts bring water from distant sources. Sewers carry waste away. Warehouses store imported grain. Apartments house large numbers of residents. Public baths, theatres, temples, and administrative buildings fill the city. Yet the very success of Rome creates conditions for future burial. Buildings wear out, fires damage districts, floods from the Tiber deposit sediment, structures collapse and are replaced. New emperors sponsor construction projects that reshape neighbourhoods. Older buildings become foundations for newer ones. Streets are repaired and raised. Rubble accumulates. The city slowly begins to elevate itself. Archaeological excavations reveal just how dramatic this accumulation becomes. In some areas, Roman streets now lie several metres below modern ground level. Ancient buildings that once stood prominently above the city are partially buried beneath later deposits. Entire neighbourhoods survive underground preserved because newer constructions sealed them beneath layers of earth and debris. One of the most striking examples involves the city's ancient houses and apartment complexes. Many structures disappear from view not because they are destroyed completely, but because successive generations build above them. Floors become ceilings for later spaces. Foundations support new walls. Courtyards vanish beneath expanding urban development. Sometimes archaeologists descend through centuries almost like travellers moving backward through time. Modern surfaces give way to medieval remains. Medieval remains reveal late Roman structures. Deeper still lie earlier phases of imperial construction. Beneath them may be traces of Republican Rome. Occasionally even older evidence emerges hinting at the settlement's earlier centuries. The underground world preserves details rarely visible in historical texts. Painted walls survive in dark chambers sealed for centuries. Drainage systems reveal sophisticated engineering. Household objects remain where residents once left them. Storage rooms preserve evidence of commerce. Workshops contain traces of manufacturing activities. Together, these discoveries provide glimpses of ordinary urban life that official histories often overlook. The evidence remains incomplete because only portions of Rome can be excavated. Much of the ancient city lies beneath active neighborhoods, government buildings, churches, and infrastructure. Researchers work within practical limits. Every excavation exposes a fragment of a much larger hidden landscape. This reality occasionally leads to remarkable discoveries in unexpected places. Construction projects have uncovered forgotten streets beneath modern buildings. Renovation work has revealed buried structures hidden for centuries. Utility installations sometimes expose walls' mosaics and foundations no one anticipated finding. Each discovery reinforces the same conclusion. The visible city occupies only the uppermost layer of a far deeper urban archive. Religion plays an important role in this story as well. As Christianity spreads through the Roman world, sacred landscapes transform. Pagan temples fall out of use or are repurposed. New churches rise. Some are built directly above earlier structures. Others incorporate material from older buildings. The city changes without completely abandoning its past. As centuries pass, invasions, political instability, and economic decline alter Rome's fortunes. Population decreases dramatically compared with imperial levels. Certain districts are abandoned. Monuments deteriorate. Yet the city never disappears entirely. Communities continue living among the remains. New phases of construction adapt existing structures for different purposes. This continuity helps explain why so much survives underground. In completely abandoned cities, weather and erosion often destroy exposed remains. In Rome, later development frequently protects earlier layers by burying them. Structures vanish from sight but remain preserved beneath newer construction. The process resembles placing documents into storage rather than throwing them away. One particularly fascinating aspect of Rome's hidden landscape involves its infrastructure. Ancient engineers create systems designed for durability. Some continue influencing the city centuries after the empire itself declines. Roads establish routes that shape later movement. Water systems affect patterns of development. Foundations constrain future construction choices. The physical decisions of long-dead builders continue guiding modern urban life. Scholars still debate the precise sequence of changes in many areas of the city. The archaeological record is vast but fragmented. Different districts experience different histories. Fires affect some neighborhoods while leaving others untouched. Flooding deposits sediment unevenly. Construction projects vary in scale and timing. No single explanation fully accounts for the complex layers preserved beneath Rome. Yet certain patterns emerge clearly. Cities do not simply replace themselves, they absorb themselves. Each generation inherits a physical landscape shaped by earlier generations and modifies it according to present needs. Over long periods, the result becomes a city composed of many cities occupying the same space. Rome provides one of the most visible examples because portions of its ancient world remain accessible. Visitors can descend into underground spaces and encounter roads, houses, and structures that once formed part of everyday urban life. These places offer a rare opportunity to experience the vertical nature of history directly. But even Rome represents only one version of the phenomenon. Far to the east, another great city rises at a strategic crossroads between continents. For thousands of years, it serves as a capital, a commercial hub, a religious center, and a gateway between worlds. Like Rome, it accumulates layers of civilization beneath its streets. Yet its hidden landscape contains a different story, one shaped by empires, conquests, engineering marvels, and forgotten chambers concealed beneath one of the most remarkable cities ever built. There beneath modern Istanbul, entire chapters of history remain hidden below the surface, waiting to reveal how civilizations can vanish without ever truly leaving the places they once called home. The skyline of Istanbul stretches across one of the most strategic locations on Earth. Ferries cross the Bosporus. Cargo ships move between seas. Mosques, apartment blocks, markets, and modern infrastructure occupy a landscape that has attracted human settlement for thousands of years. Few cities possess such a powerful connection between geography and history. Even fewer conceal so many layers of civilization beneath their streets. Long before Istanbul becomes a modern metropolis, it serves as the center of successive empires. The city occupies a narrow passage linking Europe and Asia, while controlling access between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. Trade, military power, diplomacy, and migration all converge here. As a result, generation after generation invests enormous resources into the city's growth. The location itself helps explain the continuity. Whoever controls this crossroads gains influence over major routes connecting continents. Empires rise, transform, and disappear, yet the strategic value of the site remains. Like Rome, the city survives, not because history leaves it untouched, but because every era finds new reasons to remain. The earliest known settlement occupies a modest position compared with the immense city that follows. Over centuries, however, fortifications expand, harbours grow busier, markets attract merchants from distant lands, religious institutions accumulate wealth and influence. Urban development spreads across the surrounding terrain. As populations increase, the same pattern seen in other long-lived cities begins to unfold. Buildings are repaired, replaced, and rebuilt. Defensive walls are strengthened. Streets are modified. Fires destroy districts. Earthquakes damage structures. New rulers reshape the city according to changing political and cultural priorities. Layer upon layer accumulates. The process becomes particularly dramatic during the era when the city is known as Constantinople, capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. Massive public works transform the urban landscape. Palaces, churches, administrative buildings, and infrastructure projects alter nearly every part of the city. Wealth from across the empire flows into construction. Yet even these grand achievements eventually become buried. One of the most remarkable examples remains hidden underground for centuries. In the 19th century and continuing into modern times, researchers begin investigating reports of mysterious structures beneath the city. What they find reveals an underground world far larger than many had imagined. Among the discoveries are enormous cisterns, underground reservoirs built to store water for the city. Supported by forests of stone columns, these chambers create vast subterranean spaces beneath the modern streets. Some remain partially flooded. Others preserve architectural details that survived long after the political systems that created them vanished. Descending into one of these cisterns can feel like entering another civilization entirely. Rows of columns disappear into darkness. Reflections shimmer across still water. The noise of the modern city fades above. These structures demonstrate the extraordinary engineering capabilities of earlier inhabitants, while also illustrating how easily major elements of urban landscapes can disappear from public awareness. The cisterns are only part of the story. Excavations throughout Istanbul repeatedly uncover traces of forgotten neighborhoods, ancient harbor facilities, buried roads, and long-lost buildings. Construction projects often reveal evidence from multiple periods at once. Ottoman remains may appear above Byzantine layers. Byzantine structures may rest upon earlier foundations. Each discovery adds another piece to an increasingly complex picture. One of the most significant revelations emerges during major transportation projects. When modern infrastructure development requires extensive excavation, Archaeologists gain rare opportunities to investigate deeply buried areas. The results transform understanding of the city's past. Ancient ships emerge from former harbour deposits. Wooden structures survive in waterlogged conditions. Artifacts reveal commercial networks extending across vast regions. Entire sections of the old waterfront appear where modern residents never suspected they existed. The discoveries highlight an important aspect of urban archaeology. Cities are not static environments. Coastlines change. Harbours fill with sediment. Rivers alter their courses. Areas once central to economic life may become buried and forgotten as geography evolves. What appears to be solid ground today may once have been open water, crowded with vessels from distant lands. The evidence remains incomplete, however. Scholars know that much of the city's buried history remains inaccessible beneath active neighbourhoods and infrastructure. Excavations provide valuable snapshots, rather than a complete map of the hidden landscape. Earthquakes add another dimension to the story. Istanbul occupies a region shaped by powerful geological forces. Throughout its history, earthquakes have damaged buildings, altered districts, and forced repeated reconstruction. Some buried structures survive precisely because later rebuilding sealed them beneath newer layers. Others remain fragmented, preserving evidence of sudden destruction. Natural disasters alone cannot explain the city's hidden depths. Human decisions play an equally important role. Political transitions reshape urban priorities. Religious transformations alter sacred spaces. Economic shifts change patterns of development. Military conflicts damage some districts while sparing others. The resulting landscape becomes a complex record of adaptation and survival. Perhaps nowhere is this more visible than in the relationship between Byzantine and Ottoman periods. Rather than erasing everything that came before, new rulers often reuse existing infrastructure. Buildings are modified, materials are recycled, urban layouts influence future development. Elements of earlier civilizations continue functioning within new political and cultural frameworks. This continuity creates one of the most fascinating characteristics of buried cities. Civilizations that appear separate in textbooks often overlap physically in the archaeological record. Their remains coexist beneath modern streets. Distinct historical eras become interconnected layers of a single urban story. What survives in the record suggests that countless residents lived their lives without realizing how deeply connected they were to earlier generations. They walked roads shaped by older routes. They used infrastructure influenced by long-forgotten engineers. They occupied spaces transformed repeatedly over centuries. Modern Istanbul continues this process today. Construction, renovation, transportation projects, and urban expansion constantly interact with buried history. Every excavation carries the possibility of discovery. Every foundation dug into the ground risks encountering traces of another world hidden below. Yet there is another city where the relationship between ancient and modern reaches an even more dramatic level. There millions of people live above the remains of a once great capital that did not simply influence the modern city, it was physically buried beneath it. Temples, roads, canals, and palaces survive below one of the largest urban centers on Earth. The story of that hidden world begins not beneath Europe or the Mediterranean, but in the heart of the Americas, where an extraordinary civilization continues to emerge from beneath the streets of modern Mexico City. Modern Mexico City is one of the largest urban centers on Earth. Millions of people move through its streets every day. Highways cut across vast districts. Towers rise above neighborhoods that seem to extend endlessly toward the horizon. Yet beneath this immense modern metropolis lies the remains of another great city, one that astonished the first outsiders who saw it, and whose presence continues to shape the landscape centuries after its fall. The buried city is Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Mexica civilization often referred to as the Aztec Empire. Long before Spanish ships crossed the Atlantic, this city stood at the center of a powerful political and economic system. Built on islands within a large lake basin, it became one of the most remarkable urban achievements of the pre-Columbian Americas. To understand why so much of Tenochtitlan remains hidden beneath modern Mexico City, it is necessary to imagine the landscape as it once existed. The Valley of Mexico was not the dry urban environment familiar today. Large lakes dominated the basin. Water surrounded settlements. Causeways connected islands to the mainland. Canoes transported goods through networks of canals. Agricultural systems known as chinampas produced enormous quantities of food. The city appeared to float upon the water. When Spanish forces and their indigenous allies entered Tenochtitlan in the early 16th century, they encountered a city unlike anything they expected. Broad causeways crossed the lake. Markets attracted thousands of people. Temples and public buildings rose above densely populated districts. Waterways functioned as transportation routes woven through the urban fabric. The city represented centuries of development and engineering adapted to its unique environment. Then came conquest. Military conflict, disease, political upheaval, and the collapse of existing authority transformed the region. Tenochtitlan suffered devastating damage during the fighting. Buildings were destroyed, infrastructure deteriorated, large sections of the city fell into ruin, yet the location remained too valuable to abandon. Instead of establishing a completely new settlement elsewhere, the conquerors chose to build directly upon the remains of the defeated capital. Stones from temples and public buildings were reused. Foundations were incorporated into new construction. Colonial authorities reshaped the city according to different political and religious priorities. The process created one of the most remarkable examples of a civilization buried beneath its successor. Unlike some lost cities that disappear through abandonment, Tenochtitlan remained occupied continuously. Its structures vanished from view because another city grew on top of them. Over time, memory of the earlier urban landscape faded. Churches replaced temples. Colonial buildings altered the skyline. New streets obscured older routes. Yet the buried city never entirely disappeared. Archaeological discoveries throughout Mexico City repeatedly reveal fragments of the ancient capital. Construction crews encounter walls, canals, foundations, sculptures, and ceremonial structures. Excavations expose evidence of neighborhoods once filled with activity centuries before the arrival of Europeans. One discovery becomes particularly famous. In the late 20th century, workers uncover a large carved stone near the center of the city. Further investigation reveals remains associated with the Templo Mayor, one of the most important religious complexes of Tenochtitlan. The finding sparks extensive archaeological work and transforms understanding of the buried capital. The excavation demonstrates how much survives beneath the modern city. Layers of history emerge one above another. Colonial structures overlap with indigenous remains. Earlier phases of construction appear beneath later ones. Archaeologists begin reconstructing parts of an urban landscape long hidden from view. The evidence reveals not only monumental architecture but also ordinary life. Household objects, tools, food remains, and trade goods provide insight into daily activities. Merchants, farmers, artisans, religious specialists, and political leaders all leave traces within the archaeological record. What survives in the record suggests a city of extraordinary complexity. Trade networks connected Tenochtitlan to distant regions. Exotic materials arrived from hundreds of kilometers away. Markets distributed goods across the urban population. Agricultural systems supported large numbers of residents. Administrative institutions coordinated resources on a massive scale. Yet perhaps the most surprising aspect of the buried city is how strongly it continues to influence the modern one. The geography of Mexico City remains shaped by decisions made centuries ago. Some streets follow routes established long before colonial rule. Certain districts occupy areas important in the ancient capital. The underlying landscape still reflects patterns created when the valley was dominated by lakes. At the same time, the transformation of the environment has produced significant consequences. Colonial authorities gradually drained much of the lake system. Urban expansion accelerated, ground conditions changed, buildings rose over former lake beds. As modern Mexico City grew, the city began sinking unevenly into the soft sediments beneath it. This phenomenon creates unusual challenges. Some structures settle faster than others. Infrastructure requires constant adaptation. Archaeologists must account for changing ground levels when interpreting buried remains. The ancient relationship between city and water continues influencing life in the present. Scholars still debate certain aspects of Tenochtitlan's development and organization. The evidence remains incomplete because much of the site lies beneath one of the world's largest cities. Excavating entire districts is impossible. Researchers rely on construction projects, targeted investigations, and fragments of surviving evidence. Even so, each discovery reinforces the same conclusion. The modern metropolis occupies the physical space of an older civilization, whose remains persist below the surface. This hidden continuity can feel almost unsettling. Residents walk above temples they cannot see. Vehicles pass over canals long buried. Office buildings stand where ceremonial spaces once attracted thousands of participants. The ancient city remains present not as a distant ruin outside the urban landscape, but as part of the foundation beneath it. The story of Mexico City demonstrates that civilizations do not always vanish completely. Sometimes they remain hidden in plain sight, concealed by later generations, who inherit their landscapes and unknowingly preserve their traces. Yet many buried discoveries occur without the fame associated with ancient capitals. Around the world, workers digging subway tunnels, foundations, roads, and utility lines continue uncovering forgotten structures in unexpected places. Some finds are small, others transform entire interpretations of local history. Together, these discoveries reveal that hidden cities are not rare exceptions. They are a recurring feature of urban life itself, waiting beneath construction sites, beneath neighborhoods, and beneath the ordinary surfaces of the modern world. Not every buried city announces itself through famous monuments or dramatic archaeological expeditions. More often, the hidden past appears unexpectedly. A tunnel project encounters an ancient wall. Workers laying utility cables uncover a forgotten cemetery. Excavation for a parking garage reveals foundations no historical record mentions. What begins as an ordinary construction project suddenly becomes an encounter with another civilization. These moments occur so frequently that archaeologists in many major cities have developed entire systems for responding to accidental discoveries. Modern urban development constantly cuts into layers of history. Every foundation, trench, subway extension, sewer installation, or transportation project creates an opportunity to glimpse worlds hidden beneath the surface. The discoveries vary enormously in scale. Sometimes the find consists of a few fragments of pottery or traces of an old road. At other times, entire neighborhoods emerge. Streets, workshops, houses, storage facilities, religious structures, and defensive walls appear where no one expected them. Modern engineering projects occasionally become some of the most important archaeological investigations ever conducted. The reason is simple. Urban archaeology often depends on access. Researchers may know that buried remains exist beneath a city, but without excavation opportunities, much of that evidence remains unreachable. Construction projects temporarily open windows into underground landscapes. Archaeologists must work quickly documenting discoveries before development continues. This urgency creates a distinctive atmosphere. Ancient history and modern progress meet face to face. Excavators remove soil intended for new infrastructure, while archaeologists examine evidence left by people who lived centuries or millennia earlier. Two very different visions of the future intersect in the same place. One remarkable example appears repeatedly in cities with long histories of occupation. Workers expect to encounter isolated artifacts. Instead, they uncover entire systems. A forgotten drainage network emerges beneath modern roads. Ancient water channels continue carrying groundwater long after their builders disappear. Hidden chambers survive beneath buildings that stood for centuries without anyone realizing what lay below. Underground passageways connect structures whose relationships had been lost from memory. Such discoveries remind researchers that ancient cities were not merely collections of buildings. They're a functioning environment supported by infrastructure. Water had to be supplied, waste had to be managed, goods had to be transported, populations required food security and organization. Because infrastructure often lies below ground, some of the most important elements of ancient urban life remain hidden, long after visible structures vanish. Railway construction has proven especially valuable for archaeology. Across many countries, large transportation projects have uncovered extensive remains. Deep excavations expose layers rarely accessible through smaller investigations. Entire sequences of occupation become visible. In some cases, discoveries force engineers to alter construction plans. Archaeological remains may prove too significant to destroy. Preservation efforts reshape development schedules. Modern cities pause briefly while ancient evidence is recorded and protected. The tension between preservation and development is not always easy to resolve. Living cities require housing, transportation, utilities, and economic growth. Archaeological resources are finite and often fragile. Balancing these priorities demands difficult decisions. Some remains are preserved in place. Others are documented carefully before construction proceeds. Scholars still debate the best approaches in many situations because no single solution fully accounts for every circumstance. Yet the discoveries themselves continue changing historical understanding. A buried marketplace may reveal trade connections previously unknown. Human remains can provide evidence of migration, disease, nutrition, and population change. Workshop debris exposes manufacturing activities absent from written records. Ancient seeds preserved in soil reveal agricultural practices and environmental conditions. Often the most revealing finds are surprisingly ordinary. A lost shoe, a broken bowl, animal bones discarded after meals, fragments of fabric, tools worn smooth through years of use. These objects rarely attract headlines, yet they allow archaeologists to reconstruct everyday life with remarkable precision. Grand monuments tell the story of rulers. Ordinary objects tell the story of everyone else. The evidence remains incomplete because accidental discoveries expose only fragments of much larger landscapes. An excavation trench may cut through one corner of a neighborhood while leaving the rest untouched. Researchers piece together broader interpretations from scattered clues. Every discovery contributes another part of an enormous puzzle. Sometimes the puzzle produces unexpected results. Entire chapters of urban history emerge where none were anticipated. Settlements thought to be small turn out to have been substantial. Districts believed unimportant reveal evidence of economic significance. Historical timelines require revision. Established assumptions become less certain. What survives in the archaeological record often reflects chance as much as design. Fire may preserve some materials while destroying others. Flood deposits can protect delicate remains. Construction activities may remove entire layers from one area while leaving adjacent sections intact. The resulting picture is always partial. Even so, certain patterns appear repeatedly. Human communities tend to cluster around favorable locations. Successful settlements attract growth. growth encourages rebuilding. Rebuilding creates layers. Over long periods, cities become archives of their own existence. Beneath modern neighborhoods lie traces of earlier generations confronting many of the same challenges: obtaining food, managing water, conducting trade, adapting to environmental change, and responding to political uncertainty. Occasionally, discoveries reveal moments frozen in time. A workshop abandoned suddenly, household possessions left behind during a crisis, buildings damaged by disaster and never rebuilt. Such finds provide unusually direct glimpses into the past. Instead of gradual accumulation, they preserve specific events and human experiences. These moments lead naturally toward another major force responsible for buried cities. Continuous rebuilding explains much of the hidden world beneath modern urban centers, but not all of it. Sometimes entire communities disappear rapidly. Catastrophic events transform landscapes in ways that ordinary urban development never could. Volcanoes bury settlements beneath ash. Earthquakes destroy neighborhoods in moments. Floods deposit enormous quantities of sediment. Tsunamis erase coastlines. Natural disasters can conceal entire cities almost overnight, preserving them in ways both tragic and extraordinary. The story of hidden civilizations beneath modern cities is therefore not only a story of growth and continuity, it is also a story of catastrophe. Some of the best preserved urban worlds survive underground because disaster interrupted ordinary life and sealed the evidence beneath layers of destruction. In those rare moments, history does not slowly sink beneath the surface. It is suddenly swallowed by it. For most buried cities, disappearance is a slow process. Streets rise a little higher. Buildings are rebuilt. Debris accumulates. Centuries pass. The urban landscape gradually sinks beneath newer layers of development. Yet history also preserves another pathway into the underground world. Sometimes entire communities vanish not over generations, but within days, hours, or even minutes. Natural disasters possess the power to transform cities with startling speed. A volcanic eruption can cover neighborhoods beneath meters of ash. An earthquake can reduce buildings to rubble. Floods can bury streets under thick deposits of mud and sediment. Tsunamis can erase coastal settlements and reshape shorelines. These events interrupt ordinary life, abruptly preserving moments that might otherwise have disappeared. The archaeological record contains many examples where catastrophe becomes an unexpected agent of preservation. When buildings collapse suddenly and remain buried, everyday objects often stay where people left them. Workshops preserve tools. Kitchens retain cooking equipment. Storage areas contain goods awaiting use or trade. Instead of the gradual recycling that characterizes long-lived cities' disaster, sometimes freezes a particular moment in time. This preservation creates an unusual kind of historical evidence. In cities transformed slowly through rebuilding, archaeologists must reconstruct patterns from layers accumulated across centuries. In disaster-buried sites, evidence may capture conditions from a single event. The resulting picture can be extraordinarily detailed. Volcanic eruptions provide some of the clearest examples. Ash behaves differently from ordinary soil. When deposited rapidly, it seals structures beneath protective layers. Oxygen becomes limited. Exposure to weather decreases. Fragile materials survive far longer than they otherwise might. Organic remains, architectural details, and everyday objects can remain remarkably intact. What survives in the record suggests that entire urban environments may endure underground long after visible traces disappear from the surface. Flooding produces similar effects under certain conditions. Rivers have supported cities throughout human history, but they also create risks. Major floods can deposit enormous quantities of sediment in a short period. Streets vanish beneath mud. Buildings become partially buried. Neighborhoods are abandoned or rebuilt above newly elevated ground levels. Over time, repeated flooding may conceal substantial portions of earlier settlements. Ancient river cities often preserve evidence of this process. Archaeologists excavating beneath modern districts sometimes encounter thick layers of flood deposits separating different phases of occupation. These layers function almost like bookmarks within the archaeological record-marking periods when natural forces reshaped urban life. Earthquakes add another dimension. Unlike floods or volcanic eruptions, earthquakes frequently destroy structures without necessarily burying them completely. Yet the aftermath often contributes to urban layering. Damaged buildings may be leveled and rebuilt. Rubble becomes fill material. Ground surfaces rise. New construction obscures earlier phases of development. The disaster itself may last only moments. Its archaeological consequences can influence a city for centuries. In some regions, repeated earthquakes create especially complex urban histories. Communities rebuild again and again after successive events. Each reconstruction leaves traces. Each generation adapts to lessons learned from previous destruction. The city survives, but earlier versions become increasingly difficult to see from the surface. No single explanation fully accounts for the preservation of buried urban landscapes. Catastrophe rarely acts alone. Human decisions shape what happens afterward. A flood may damage part of a city, but rebuilding determines how the landscape changes. An earthquake may destroy structures, yet reconstruction influences which remains survive underground. Even volcanic disasters interact with later human activity. Some sites remain abandoned. Others attract new settlers who build above the buried remains. The relationship between destruction and preservation is therefore more complicated than it first appears. A disaster may seem entirely negative from the perspective of those who experience it. Yet centuries later, the same event can provide archaeologists with unusually rich evidence. The tragedy that ends one phase of urban life may help preserve knowledge of that world for future generations. This reality becomes particularly striking when archaeologists uncover evidence of daily routines interrupted suddenly. Meals remain unfinished. Tools lie where they were last used. Goods await transport. Buildings preserve signs of work, trade, and domestic activity. These details create powerful connections across time. History often feels distant because written records emphasize rulers' wars and major events. Buried cities reveal something different. They expose ordinary moments. They show people engaged in familiar activities before circumstances changed unexpectedly. The scale of the disaster may be immense, but the evidence often feels personal. A doorway worn smooth by countless footsteps. A storage jar waiting to be opened. A workshop bench left standing where its owner last worked. Such discoveries remind researchers that urban history is ultimately composed of individual lives. Scholars still debate the precise impact of many ancient disasters. Written accounts can be incomplete or exaggerated. Archaeological evidence may support some interpretations while challenging others. Environmental data sometimes reveals complexities absent from historical narratives. The evidence remains incomplete and uncertainty often persists. Even so, broad patterns emerge. Cities survive because people adapt. Some communities rebuild after catastrophe, others relocate, some disappear entirely. Yet favourable locations frequently attract new settlement regardless of what happened before. Rivers remain valuable, harbours continue facilitating trade, strategic positions retain importance. As a result, disasters rarely erase urban history completely. More often they add another layer to it. A buried city may owe its preservation to volcanic ash flood sediments, earthquake rubble or storm deposits. Later generations then build above those remains, creating additional layers. Catastrophe and continuity become intertwined. This interplay presents a challenge for archaeologists attempting to understand the past. Every buried structure must be interpreted within a broader sequence of events. Was it abandoned gradually or suddenly? Was it destroyed by natural forces, human conflict, economic decline, or some combination of factors? Did people return afterward, or was the site left untouched? Answering such questions requires careful investigation. The clues are often subtle: a layer of ash, a collapsed wall, sediment deposited by floodwater, burn marks on stone, tiny fragments of plant material preserved in soil. Together, these traces allow researchers to reconstruct histories hidden beneath modern landscapes. Yet uncovering those histories is rarely straightforward. Buried cities do not reveal themselves willingly. Archaeologists must work through fragmented evidence, limited access, and countless uncertainties. Understanding what lies beneath modern streets requires methods as complex as the cities themselves, and that challenge, the challenge of finding evidence within living urban environments, has become one of the defining tasks of modern archaeology. Finding a buried city is one thing, understanding it is something else entirely. From the outside, archaeology often appears straightforward. A discovery is made, excavation begins, ancient structures emerge from the ground, history reveals itself. The reality is far more complicated. Every buried city exists as a puzzle with most of its pieces missing, damaged, or inaccessible. The deeper archaeologists investigate, the more they realize how much remains hidden. This challenge becomes especially severe in modern cities. An abandoned site in an empty desert can sometimes be excavated extensively. Researchers may spend years uncovering large areas. Urban archaeology rarely enjoys such freedom. Living cities continue functioning above the remains. Roads must stay open. Buildings remain occupied. Utilities serve millions of residents. Excavations often take place in confined spaces surrounded by active infrastructure. A buried city may stretch for kilometers beneath the surface, yet archaeologists gain access to only a small portion of it. Imagine attempting to understand an entire book while reading only a few scattered paragraphs. That situation resembles the task facing researchers investigating hidden urban worlds. Every excavation provides valuable information, but each represents only a fragment of a much larger landscape. The limitations begin with space. Modern buildings occupy ground that once belonged to earlier civilizations. Excavating beneath those structures is often impossible. Historic remains may survive directly under apartment blocks, government offices, hospitals, or transportation networks. Archaeologists know they exist, but practical realities prevent extensive investigation. As a result, knowledge develops gradually. A construction project reveals part of a street. Years later, another excavation uncovers a nearby building. Decades afterward, a utility installation exposes additional structures. Researchers combine evidence from separate locations, assembling a broader picture piece by piece. The process resembles reconstructing a city from scattered windows rather than viewing it from above. Technology has transformed this work dramatically. Ground-penetrating radar allows researchers to detect buried features without excavation. Magnetometry identifies anomalies beneath the surface. Electrical resistance surveys reveal hidden walls, roads, and foundations. Three-dimensional mapping systems combine information from multiple investigations. These tools help archaeologists look underground while minimizing disruption to modern life. Yet technology has limits. Geological conditions influence results. Modern infrastructure creates interference. Buried remains may be difficult to distinguish from natural features. Remote sensing can suggest the presence of structures, but excavation is usually required to confirm interpretations. The evidence remains incomplete until researchers physically investigate the site. Excavation itself presents another challenge. Archaeology is inherently destructive. Once a layer is removed, it cannot be replaced exactly as it was. Every decision matters. Researchers must document carefully before proceeding deeper. Notes, photographs, drawings, digital models and laboratory analyses become essential records. In buried cities, this responsibility becomes even greater because opportunities may never return. A construction project might expose a location only briefly. Archaeologists often work under strict deadlines. Evidence must be recorded quickly without sacrificing accuracy. The pressure can be intense. Modern development schedules and archaeological priorities do not always align perfectly. Despite these difficulties, remarkable discoveries continue emerging. Sometimes a single excavation transforms understanding of an entire city. A forgotten district appears where scholars expected open space. A road reveals connections between neighborhoods. A buried harbor demonstrates that the ancient coastline differed significantly from the modern one. Even small finds can have major implications. A coin helps establish a date. Imported pottery reveals trade networks. Plant remains indicate environmental conditions. Animal bones provide evidence of diet. Tiny fragments of information accumulate until broader patterns begin to emerge. The process resembles detective work across centuries. Researchers examine soil layers, building materials, artifact distributions, environmental data, and historical records. Each source contributes part of the story. None is sufficient alone. Interpretation requires combining multiple lines of evidence while acknowledging uncertainty. Scholars still debate many conclusions because buried cities rarely provide complete answers. A wall may indicate a defensive structure, a property boundary, or part of a larger building. A concentration of artifacts might represent a market, a workshop, or household activity. Competing explanations often remain plausible. The archaeological record provides clues rather than certainty. This uncertainty is not a weakness of archaeology. It is an honest reflection of the available evidence. Popular portrayals sometimes suggest that discoveries instantly solve historical mysteries. In reality, major finds often generate new questions. An unexpected structure challenges existing theories. A revised date alters established timelines. Previously accepted interpretations require reconsideration. Knowledge advances through continuous refinement. Urban archaeology also faces ethical considerations. Buried cities are not merely scientific resources. They often represent the heritage of living communities. Decisions about excavation, preservation, and interpretation carry cultural significance. Different groups may view the same remains through different historical perspectives. Balancing these interests requires careful judgment. What survives in the record belongs not only to the distant past but also to the present. Modern societies inherit responsibility for protecting evidence that cannot be recreated once destroyed. Every excavation involves choices about what to investigate, what to preserve, and how to communicate discoveries. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of buried cities is how much remains unknown despite decades of research. Major capitals continue yielding surprises. Construction crews still encounter unexpected structures. New technologies reveal hidden features beneath familiar landscapes. Entire districts remain inaccessible beneath modern neighborhoods. Researchers know that important evidence exists beyond current reach. The hidden city is always larger than the excavated one. This reality produces a strange mixture of knowledge and mystery. Archaeologists understand far more about ancient urban life than previous generations ever imagined. At the same time, they recognize the immense gaps that remain. Every buried street suggests another nearby. Every foundation hints at additional buildings. Every discovery points toward a wider landscape concealed beneath the surface. The challenge, then, is not simply finding evidence. It is learning how to read it. Because walls, roads, tools, bones, and discarded objects are more than physical remains. Together they form a language through which lost civilizations communicate across time. understanding that language requires patience, context and attention to details that might appear insignificant at first glance. And among all the clues hidden beneath modern cities, few prove more revealing than the objects people leave behind in their daily lives. A buried wall can reveal where a building once stood. A road can show how people moved through a city. Foundations can outline neighborhoods long erased from the surface. Yet some of the most revealing evidence recovered from hidden urban worlds comes from objects so ordinary that their owners rarely gave them a second thought. A broken bowl, a worn sandal, a rusted tool, a handful of seeds preserved in ancient soil. These fragments rarely attract the attention commanded by palaces, temples, or monumental architecture. Nevertheless, they often tell richer stories about the people who once inhabited buried cities. Great structures reveal what societies wanted others to see. Everyday objects reveal how people actually lived. This distinction becomes especially important when investigating civilizations hidden beneath modern cities. Written records, when they survive, usually focus on rulers, military campaigns, religious institutions, and political events. Ordinary residents rarely appear in detail. Archaeology fills that gap. The material remains of daily life allow researchers to reconstruct experiences that historical texts often overlook. Consider a simple cooking vessel uncovered beneath an urban neighborhood. At first glance, it may seem unremarkable, yet laboratory analysis can reveal surprising information. Traces of food absorbed into the pottery provide evidence of diet. Manufacturing techniques indicate local traditions or foreign influences. Clay composition identifies where the vessel was produced. Signs of repair suggest economic conditions or cultural attitudes toward reuse. One object becomes a source of multiple stories. The same principle applies to countless other discoveries. Animal bones reveal what people ate and which species they raised, hunted, or imported. Fish remains indicate trade routes and environmental conditions. Plant fragments expose agricultural systems and seasonal patterns. Charcoal preserved in hearths provides clues about fuel sources and local landscapes. What survives in the record suggests that even the smallest artifacts can illuminate larger historical processes. Trade offers a particularly striking example. A buried city may appear isolated when viewed on a map, yet imported objects often reveal extensive connections. Pottery from distant regions, precious stones transported across continents, metal goods produced hundreds of kilometers away, exotic materials incorporated into local crafts. These discoveries demonstrate that ancient urban centers were frequently part of complex networks stretching far beyond their immediate surroundings. The evidence can challenge assumptions about the scale of interaction between different societies. A merchant purchasing imported goods may never have traveled far personally, yet the object passing through local markets often originated in distant lands. Hidden beneath modern cities, such artifacts preserve evidence of relationships that connected entire regions long before modern transportation. Human remains provide another powerful source of information. Buried skeletons reveal details impossible to obtain from architecture alone. Bone chemistry can indicate where individuals spent their childhoods. Evidence of disease sheds light on public health. Signs of physical labor reveal occupational patterns. Nutritional indicators help researchers understand social inequality and access to resources. The findings sometimes overturn traditional historical narratives. Written sources may emphasize political stability, while skeletal evidence reveals widespread hardship. Official records may celebrate prosperity, even as archaeological remains indicate nutritional stress among ordinary populations. The buried city preserves perspectives often absent from surviving texts. Children leave particularly poignant traces. Small toys, miniature objects, footprints preserved in soft surfaces, and personal belongings occasionally survive underground. These discoveries provide rare glimpses into stages of life that receive little attention in many historical records. They remind researchers that cities were not abstract systems, but communities filled with families navigating everyday routines. The emotional impact of such finds can be profound. A tiny shoe uncovered beneath a street, a gaming piece lost centuries ago, marks scratched into a wall by someone whose name is long forgotten. These details narrow the distance between present and past. Archaeologists often describe moments when a discovery suddenly makes an ancient city feel familiar, not because the culture becomes identical to modern society, but because certain aspects of human experience remain recognizable across time. People prepare meals, they repair damaged belongings, they raise children, they form friendships, pursue opportunities, and adapt to changing circumstances. The artifacts preserved beneath modern cities reveal these continuities. At the same time, they highlight differences. Objects reflect distinct belief systems, technologies, social structures, and environmental conditions. A tool designed for one economic system may appear unusual to later observers. Food remains can reveal diets shaped by ecosystems very different from those familiar today. Household arrangements expose cultural practices that no longer exist. The challenge lies in interpreting these traces accurately. Scholars still debate the meaning of many discoveries. A particular object may serve multiple purposes. A building's function may change over time. Artifacts can move between contexts through trade reuse or natural processes. No single explanation fully accounts for every find. The evidence remains incomplete, and uncertainty is an unavoidable part of archaeological interpretation. Yet patterns emerge when thousands of discoveries are considered together. Entire neighborhoods begin to take shape. Economic activities become visible. Social differences appear in housing, diet, and material possessions. Religious practices leave traces in ritual objects and sacred spaces. Trade networks become easier to map. Population changes become easier to detect. The buried city slowly regains definition. Researchers can estimate where markets operated, where crafts were produced, where wealth concentrated, and where ordinary residents lived. What initially appears as scattered fragments gradually becomes a functioning urban environment populated by real people. One of the most remarkable aspects of this process is that hidden cities often preserve evidence from multiple civilizations occupying the same location. Different generations leave overlapping traces. Objects from one era appear above or below those from another. The archaeological record becomes a conversation between centuries. Sometimes that conversation produces contradictions. A district that seems prosperous in one period may appear impoverished in another. Imported luxury goods may coexist with signs of economic hardship. Religious transformations leave complex mixtures of old and new traditions. Human societies rarely fit simple narratives. These contradictions help explain why buried cities continue attracting scholarly attention. Every excavation adds information but rarely delivers complete certainty. The hidden world beneath modern streets remains both familiar and mysterious. And nowhere does that mystery become more apparent than when researchers encounter evidence that can be interpreted in more than one way. Buried cities preserve countless clues, yet those clues do not always point toward the same conclusions. As discoveries accumulate, competing explanations emerge. Historians, archaeologists, and scientists attempt to understand what happened, why it happened, and how entire urban worlds disappeared beneath the cities that replaced them. The debate itself becomes part of the story. The deeper archaeologists investigate buried cities, the more they encounter an uncomfortable reality. Evidence rarely speaks with a single voice. A wall may suggest one interpretation. Artifacts found nearby may suggest another. Environmental data may support part of a theory while challenging the rest. Hidden civilizations preserve clues, but they do not provide simple answers. This uncertainty lies at the center of many debates surrounding the cities concealed beneath modern urban landscapes. One recurring question concerns abandonment. Why do some urban districts disappear while others survive? At first glance, the explanation may appear obvious. A disaster destroys a neighborhood. Residents leave. The area becomes buried. Yet closer examination often reveals a more complicated story. A district damaged by flooding may continue to be occupied for generations. A neighborhood affected by economic decline may experience periods of recovery. Political instability might alter urban functions without causing complete abandonment. What appears to be a sudden collapse can sometimes prove to be a gradual transformation. Scholars still debate many of these transitions because the archaeological record preserves only fragments of the process. The same challenge applies to population change. A buried layer may contain fewer buildings than earlier phases. Does this indicate a shrinking population, a change in urban planning, a shift in construction materials? Different explanations can fit the same evidence. Researchers must weigh competing possibilities carefully. The problem becomes even more complex when written records enter the picture. Historical documents are valuable sources, but they possess limitations. Chroniclers often focus on extraordinary events while ignoring everyday realities. Political agendas influence descriptions. Victorious rulers shape narratives. Entire communities may receive little attention simply because no one recorded their experiences. Archaeology occasionally confirms written accounts. Just as often it complicates them. A historical source may describe a city as devastated while excavations reveal continued activity. Another text may celebrate prosperity, yet material evidence indicates widespread hardship. The buried city provides an independent record that sometimes challenges long-held assumptions. These disagreements are not signs of failure. They reflect the complexity of reconstructing the past. Consider the question of urban decline. For much of modern history, researchers often searched for single causes. A city falls because of invasion, another collapses because of drought, a third declines because trade routes change. Such explanations are appealing because they are clear and memorable. The archaeological evidence rarely supports such simplicity. Most urban transformations result from multiple factors interacting over long periods. Environmental pressures combine with political instability. Economic challenges intersect with demographic changes. Natural disasters influence decisions already shaped by social conditions. No single explanation fully accounts for the disappearance of many buried urban landscapes. This realization has transformed archaeological thinking during recent decades. Researchers increasingly view cities as dynamic systems rather than static entities. Urban success depends on relationships between people, resources, infrastructure, environment, and political institutions. Changes in one area can affect many others. The buried layers beneath modern cities preserve evidence of these interactions. A decline in imported goods may indicate disruptions in trade. Changes in diet suggest environmental stress or economic shifts. Alterations in construction practices reveal changing priorities. Abandoned infrastructure points toward evolving patterns of urban life. Each clue contributes to broader interpretations. At times, however, the uncertainty creates opportunities for speculation. Popular culture often embraces dramatic theories about hidden civilizations. Stories emerge about secret chambers, forgotten technologies, lost knowledge, or mysterious disappearances. Such ideas attract attention because they offer clear narratives and striking conclusions. Archaeologists approach these claims more cautiously. The evidence supporting extraordinary theories is frequently limited or absent. Many supposed mysteries become less mysterious when examined carefully. Underground chambers often have practical functions. Unusual artifacts usually fit within known historical contexts. Apparent gaps in the record often reflect incomplete excavation, rather than evidence of hidden secrets. This does not mean every question has been answered. Far from it. Many important uncertainties remain. Entire districts lie inaccessible beneath modern development. Some structures survive only as fragments. Environmental conditions may have destroyed crucial evidence. Future discoveries could alter current interpretation significantly. The difference lies in how uncertainty is treated. Responsible scholarship acknowledges what is known, what is inferred, and what remains unresolved. The evidence remains incomplete, and researchers accept that some questions may never receive definitive answers. This approach may appear less dramatic than sensational theories, but it often produces more fascinating results. Real urban history reveals extraordinary resilience, adaptation, and complexity. Civilizations survive challenges for centuries. Communities rebuild after disasters. Political systems transform while populations remain. Cities reinvent themselves repeatedly. The hidden layers beneath modern streets preserve these processes in remarkable detail. One particularly intriguing debate involves continuity. Where does one city end and another begin? If a settlement occupies the same location for 2,000 years, but experiences major cultural, political, and demographic changes, should it be considered one city or many? Different scholars emphasize different aspects of continuity. Some focus on population. Others prioritize institutions, urban layout, or cultural identity. The archaeological record does not always provide a clear answer. Instead, buried cities often reveal gradual transitions linking periods traditionally treated as separate. New societies inherit old infrastructure. Earlier routes influence later streets. Building materials are reused. Water systems continue functioning. Physical landscapes connect generations that may otherwise appear disconnected. This continuity challenges conventional narratives of rise and fall. Civilizations certainly collapse. Political systems disappear. Languages change. Religious traditions evolve. Yet the locations themselves often persist. Human activity continues. New communities adapt inherited environments to new circumstances. The city survives even when the civilization associated with it does not. What survives in the record suggests that urban history is less about disappearance than transformation. Buried layers document change accumulating over centuries. The hidden city beneath the modern one is not always a lost world in the conventional sense. Sometimes it is an earlier version of the same place preserved below later developments. This perspective leads toward one of the most important insights hidden beneath modern cities. The underground record is not merely a collection of ruins, it is a long-term archive of human adaptation. Within its streets, walls, objects, and infrastructure lies evidence of how societies respond to opportunity. Crisis, prosperity, conflict, environmental change, and uncertainty. And when those records are examined together across different cities and different civilizations, larger patterns begin to emerge. Patterns that reveal not just the history of individual urban centers, but something deeper about civilization itself. When archaeologists compare buried cities from different continents, different time periods and different civilizations, a remarkable pattern begins to emerge. The details vary enormously. Languages change, religions rise and fall, political systems transform, technologies evolve. Yet beneath these differences, certain recurring themes appear again and again. The underground record reveals that cities are among humanity's most persistent inventions. For thousands of years, people repeatedly gather in particular locations. They build homes, roads, markets, workshops, temples, and administrative centers. They reshape landscapes according to immediate needs. Then, future generations inherit the results, modify them, and leave their own marks behind. The process creates urban histories far longer than any individual civilization. A buried neighborhood beneath Rome may preserve evidence of imperial administration. A hidden district beneath Istanbul may reveal Byzantine commerce. Remains below Mexico City may document the power of Tenochtitlan. Yet when viewed together, these places tell a broader story. They demonstrate how human communities repeatedly adapt to changing circumstances while remaining tied to strategic locations. Rivers appear frequently in this story. Many great cities emerge beside waterways because rivers provide transportation, fresh water, fertile soils, and economic opportunities. Yet the same rivers that support urban growth also create challenges. Floods alter landscapes, sediment accumulates, shorelines shift. Entire districts become buried beneath deposits left by natural processes. The archaeological record preserves evidence of both benefit and risk. Harbours tell a similar story. Coastal cities thrive through trade and communication. Goods, people, and ideas move through ports connecting distant regions. Over time, however, coastlines change. Sediment fills harbours. Sea levels fluctuate. Storms reshape waterfronts. Areas once central to urban life may disappear beneath later development. The hidden city records these environmental transformations with remarkable clarity. Climate also leaves traces. Periods of favourable conditions often coincide with urban expansion. Agricultural productivity increases. Populations grow. Construction accelerates. Conversely, environmental stress can contribute to instability. Droughts affect food supplies. Changing rainfall patterns influence water availability. Ecosystems shift. Scholars still debate the precise role of climate in many historical transitions, but the evidence increasingly suggests that environmental conditions frequently interact with political and economic factors. No single explanation fully accounts for the rise or decline of major urban centers. Instead, buried cities reveal complex systems responding to multiple pressures simultaneously. Trade networks offer another recurring pattern. Imported goods recovered from hidden urban layers demonstrate how connected many ancient societies were. Materials traveled enormous distances. Metals crossed continents. Luxury products moved through intricate exchange systems. Merchants linked communities separated by mountains, deserts, and oceans. These connections often prove more extensive than earlier generations of scholars imagined. A buried marketplace may contain evidence of relationships extending far beyond local boundaries. Cities function not only as places of residence, but also as nodes within larger networks of communication and exchange. The underground record preserves those networks even when written documentation disappears. Migration emerges repeatedly as well. Human remains, artifacts, architectural styles, and genetic evidence all indicate movement between regions. Cities attract newcomers seeking opportunity, security, or economic advancement. Populations rarely remain static. New groups arrive, others depart. Cultural influences overlap and blend. The hidden layers beneath modern streets document centuries of demographic change. This evidence challenges simplistic ideas about isolated civilizations developing independently. Urban centers often function as meeting places where different traditions interact. The archaeological record reveals continuous exchange, adaptation, and cultural transformation. Infrastructure provides perhaps the most striking example of long-term continuity. Roads established centuries ago influence modern transportation routes. Ancient water systems shape contemporary development patterns. Property boundaries survive across generations. Decisions made by long-dead builders continue affecting urban landscapes. The buried city acts almost like a memory embedded within the ground itself. Even when residents forget earlier phases of development, the physical consequences remain. A modern neighborhood may exist where it does because of choices made hundreds or thousands of years earlier. The visible city inherits constraints and opportunities created by previous generations. This realization changes how historians think about urban continuity. Traditional narratives often emphasize dramatic events, conquests, collapses, revolutions, and disasters. These events matter, but buried cities reveal slower processes operating beneath them. Infrastructure persists, geographic advantages remain, human needs continue. The city evolves without necessarily starting over. What survives in the record suggests that transformation is usually more common than complete replacement. Even apparent collapses often involve continuity at some level. Populations decline but do not disappear entirely. Economic systems contract before recovering. Urban functions change. New political authorities adapt existing infrastructure rather than constructing everything from scratch. The underground archive preserves these gradual transitions. At the same time, buried cities reveal recurring vulnerabilities. Overcrowding creates challenges. Water management becomes increasingly important as populations grow. Social inequality can shape access to resources. Dependence on distant trade networks introduces risks. Environmental pressures accumulate. Political instability affects urban resilience. Ancient communities confront many problems recognizable today. The technologies differ. The cultural contexts vary. Yet the underlying challenges of sustaining large populations within complex urban environments remain surprisingly familiar. This does not mean history repeats itself in a simple way. Every city develops under unique circumstances. Every civilization faces distinctive conditions. Nevertheless, the archaeological record demonstrates that certain patterns appear repeatedly across time and space. The hidden worlds beneath modern cities therefore offer more than local histories. They provide long-term evidence about how human societies function. They reveal what helps cities endure and what makes them vulnerable. They show how communities respond to change. They document adaptation, innovation, conflict, cooperation, and resilience across centuries. Perhaps most importantly, they challenge the assumption that the present exists separately from the past. Modern cities often appear new because their visible surfaces are recent. Yet beneath roads, buildings, and infrastructure lie older layers preserving earlier solutions, earlier failures, and earlier ambitions. The city is not a single moment in time. It is an accumulation of countless moments compressed into one place. And as archaeologists continue uncovering those layers, another realization becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. The civilizations hidden beneath modern streets have never entirely disappeared. Their influence continues shaping the lives of people who may know nothing about them. The legacy of buried cities remains active, woven invisibly into the fabric of the modern world. The influence of buried civilizations does not end when their buildings disappear beneath the ground. In many cases, it does not end at all. A person walking through a modern city may assume that the streets, neighborhoods, and infrastructure surrounding them belong entirely to the present. The buildings appear contemporary. Traffic flows according to modern needs. Construction projects employ current technology. Yet beneath this appearance of novelty lies a deeper reality. Much of the modern urban world continues to follow patterns established by people who lived centuries or even millennia ago. The hidden city remains active long after it becomes invisible. One of the clearest examples involves transportation routes. Ancient roads were rarely placed at random. Builders selected paths that connected resources, crossed rivers, efficiently avoided difficult terrain, and linked important settlements. These practical decisions often proved effective for generations. As a result, later communities frequently reused the same routes. A Roman road becomes a medieval road. The medieval road becomes a modern street. Eventually, vehicles travel where carts, animals, and pedestrians once moved. The surface changes dramatically, but the underlying logic remains surprisingly consistent. The same phenomenon appears in countless cities around the world. Urban planners inherit landscapes already shaped by earlier development. Existing routes influence future construction. Property boundaries survive across centuries. Commercial districts remain concentrated in familiar locations. Areas historically associated with administration, religion, or trade often continue serving related functions, long after the societies that established them vanish. The continuity is sometimes so subtle that residents rarely notice it. A busy intersection may occupy a location that has directed movement for 1,000 years. A marketplace may continue operating near the site of earlier commercial activity. A public square may preserve the footprint of a much older gathering space. The hidden city quietly guides the visible one. Water systems provide another striking example. Ancient engineers devoted enormous effort to controlling and distributing water. Aqueducts, canals, reservoirs, drainage networks, and wells shaped urban development. Even when these systems cease functioning in their original form, they often continue influencing the landscape. Modern infrastructure must adapt to what already exists underground. A buried canal affects soil conditions. Ancient drainage routes influence groundwater movement. Long-forgotten reservoirs create unexpected challenges during construction. Engineers working on contemporary projects occasionally encounter structures built hundreds or thousands of years earlier, still affecting the environment around them. The past becomes a practical consideration rather than a purely historical one. In some cities, ancient foundations influence the placement of modern buildings. In others, buried walls determine where utilities can be installed. Construction plans change because forgotten structures remain hidden beneath the surface. The legacy of earlier civilizations therefore extends beyond cultural memory. It becomes physically embedded within urban space. Language preserves traces as well. Place names often survive long after their original meanings are forgotten. Neighborhoods inherit names from vanished settlements. Streets commemorate features that no longer exist. Rivers, hills, and districts retain echoes of older populations who once inhabited the landscape. These linguistic remnants function like archaeological artifacts preserved within everyday speech. Most residents rarely consider how ancient some place names may be, yet they represent another form of continuity linking present communities to buried worlds beneath their feet. Cultural traditions sometimes display similar persistence. Festivals continue in locations associated with earlier ceremonies. Religious sites remain important despite changes in belief systems. Community identities become attached to neighborhoods whose origins extend far into the past. Customs evolve, but certain patterns endure. What survives in the record suggests that complete cultural replacement is relatively rare. More often, societies absorb elements of what came before. New traditions emerge alongside older ones. Practices adapt rather than disappear entirely. Urban history becomes a process of accumulation as much as transformation. This layered continuity can produce surprising discoveries. Archaeologists occasionally uncover evidence explaining features of modern cities that had long seemed puzzling. An unusual street pattern reflects buried foundations. A persistent drainage problem originates from an ancient watercourse. An oddly shaped district preserves the outline of a forgotten structure. The hidden city reveals itself indirectly through its influence on the present. Economic geography also demonstrates this phenomenon. Commercial activity tends to cluster in favorable locations. Markets develop where transportation routes converge. Ports encourage trade. Administrative centers attract services. Once established, these patterns can persist for extraordinary lengths of time. A business district may occupy territory associated with commerce for centuries. The companies change, the products differ, the technologies evolve, yet the location continues serving similar functions because earlier development created enduring advantages. The buried city becomes part of an ongoing urban inheritance. Scholars still debate how much influence ancient urban layouts exert on modern development. The evidence varies from place to place. Some cities undergo extensive redesign, others preserve remarkable continuity. The relationship between past and present is rarely straightforward. The evidence remains incomplete, and many connections are difficult to prove conclusively. Nevertheless, broad patterns emerge across numerous urban centres. Physical landscapes matter, infrastructure matters, geography matters. Decisions made long ago continue shaping opportunities available to later generations. This realization carries an important implication. Buried civilizations are not isolated episodes disconnected from contemporary life. They form part of a continuous process. Modern cities represent the latest phase of development within locations shaped by countless earlier decisions. The underground world is therefore not merely a museum preserved beneath the surface. It remains part of the living city. Its roads influence movement, its foundations affect construction, its geography guides development, its cultural traces survive in names, traditions, and identities. The hidden civilization continues participating in urban life even when few people recognize its presence. And as archaeologists uncover more evidence from beneath modern streets, a broader conclusion begins to emerge. The phenomenon observed in Rome, Istanbul, Mexico City, and countless other locations is not exceptional. In fact, it may be one of the defining characteristics of civilization itself. The deeper humanity looks beneath its cities, the more it becomes apparent that hidden worlds are not rare discoveries. They're almost everywhere. As discoveries accumulate across continents and decades, a remarkable realization takes shape. The buried cities beneath Rome, Istanbul, Mexico City, and other famous locations are not isolated curiosities. They are part of a much larger pattern. The deeper archaeologists investigate urban landscapes around the world, the more frequently they encounter traces of forgotten settlements hidden beneath modern development. In many cases, researchers begin excavations expecting to uncover evidence from a known historical period. Instead, they find something older. A medieval town conceals Roman remains. Roman structures rest upon earlier settlements. Those settlements reveal traces of even older communities. The sequence continues downward through time. This recurring pattern suggests that human beings repeatedly return to certain places. Rivers, harbours, fertile plains, defensible hills, and strategic crossroads attract settlement generation after generation. Civilizations change, but geography often continues exerting influence. The result is a world in which countless modern cities sit atop earlier versions of themselves. Some hidden layers are well documented, others remain largely unexplored. Many have not yet been discovered at all. The possibility is both exciting and humbling. Every modern city contains visible history. Monuments, historic districts, preserved architecture, and museums offer reminders of earlier eras. Yet the invisible history may be far larger. Entire neighborhoods can remain concealed beneath streets. Forgotten infrastructure may survive below foundations. Archaeological landscapes may extend far beyond what researchers currently understand. What survives in the record suggests that humanity's urban past is considerably deeper than once imagined. Technological advances continue expanding that understanding. Ground-penetrating radar reveals hidden walls without excavation. Satellite imagery identifies ancient patterns obscured by modern construction. Three-dimensional mapping combines data from multiple sources. Digital models allow researchers to reconstruct buried landscapes with increasing precision. These tools are transforming archaeology. Features that once remained invisible now become detectable. Urban histories once considered lost can be investigated in new ways. Previously inaccessible areas yield information without requiring extensive excavation. Even so, technology does not eliminate uncertainty. A buried structure detected remotely still requires interpretation. A subsurface anomaly may represent a building, a natural feature, or something else entirely. Archaeological investigation remains a process of careful analysis rather than instant revelation. The evidence remains incomplete and many hidden cities continue resisting easy explanation. Yet one conclusion grows increasingly difficult to ignore. Modern civilization occupies only the uppermost layer of a much older human landscape. Beneath highways lie forgotten roads. Beneath office towers rest earlier foundations. Beneath train stations survive traces of markets, workshops, homes, and religious spaces. The visible city represents only the latest chapter in a narrative stretching far beyond living memory. This perspective changes how urban environments are understood. Cities often appear permanent. Their scale creates an impression of stability. Massive buildings, transportation systems, and infrastructure networks seem durable compared with individual human lives. The buried record tells a different story. Every city that once appeared permanent eventually changed. Districts expanded and contracted. Political centers shifted. Economic priorities evolved. Neighborhoods disappeared. New construction obscured older landscapes. What seemed enduring to one generation became invisible to another. The process continues today. Future archaeologists, if they study the cities of the present, may encounter similar layers. They may excavate beneath structures considered modern and discover traces of 21st century life. Roads, utilities, household objects, commercial spaces and infrastructure may become evidence used to reconstruct the experiences of people long gone. This realization introduces a subtle reversal. Modern residents often view buried cities as ancient worlds fundamentally separate from contemporary life. Yet future generations may regard today's urban environments in exactly the same way. The present is already becoming part of the archaeological record. Every building constructed today will eventually age. Every neighborhood will change. Every city will continue evolving. Some structures will disappear entirely. Others may survive beneath future development. The cycle that created hidden civilizations beneath modern cities has not ended. It is still unfolding. Scholars still debate the long-term future of many urban centers. Climate change, demographic shifts, technological transformation, economic pressures, and environmental challenges all influence urban development. The precise outcomes remain uncertain. What history demonstrates clearly, however, is that cities rarely remain static. They adapt. They absorb change. They rebuild. They reinvent themselves. And in doing so, they create new layers for future generations to uncover. The hidden worlds beneath modern streets therefore offer more than historical information. They provide perspective. They remind observers that every city exists within a much longer timeline than daily life usually reveals. The office worker crossing a busy intersection, the commuter boarding a train, the family walking through a neighborhood park all move across landscapes shaped by decisions made centuries before they were born. Most never notice. The streets appear ordinary. The buildings appear familiar. The city feels immediate and contemporary. Yet beneath the surface lie forgotten roads, abandoned houses, collapsed walls, buried marketplaces, hidden water systems, and traces of countless lives that once filled the same spaces with their own routines, ambitions, fears, and expectations. The underground city remains silent, but it is never entirely absent. Its presence lingers in foundation street patterns, place names, infrastructure, and archaeological discoveries. It influences the modern world while remaining largely unseen. And perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of all is that this phenomenon is not confined to a handful of famous locations. It extends across the urban landscape of humanity itself. The civilization hidden beneath modern cities is not a single lost society. It is the accumulated memory of countless generations layered beneath the places where people continue to live, work, build, and dream. The search for hidden civilizations often begins with a dramatic discovery. A buried wall appears beneath a construction site. Ancient foundations emerge during a subway project. Forgotten chambers are uncovered beneath a familiar street. Such moments capture attention because they seem to reveal lost worlds suddenly returning to view. Yet after following the evidence through centuries of urban history, a different understanding begins to emerge. The greatest surprise is not that hidden cities exist. The greatest surprise is how common they are. Again and again, archaeologists encounter the same pattern. Beneath modern streets lie earlier streets. Beneath contemporary buildings rest older foundations. Beneath visible cities survive traces of countless generations whose lives have largely vanished from memory. The phenomenon appears across continents, cultures, climates, and historical periods. What changes are the details. Some cities grow beside rivers. Others develop along coast crossroads or fertile plains. Some become imperial capitals. Others remain regional centers. Some experience catastrophic destruction. Others evolve gradually through centuries of rebuilding. Yet all contribute to the same larger story. Civilization rarely starts from an empty landscape. Human communities inherit places shaped by earlier communities. They adapt existing environments, modify them according to present needs, and leave new layers behind. Future generations repeat the process. The city becomes a living archive recording thousands of years of decisions. This perspective alters the meaning of urban history. Traditional narratives often focus on beginnings and endings. A city is founded, a civilization rises, an empire collapses, a new society emerges. Such events certainly matter, but the buried record reveals something equally important: continuity. Roads survive political transitions. Infrastructure outlasts governments. Geography continues influencing human behavior. Communities inherit solutions created by people they may never know existed. The underground world preserves these connections. What survives in the record suggests that urban life is best understood not as a sequence of separate civilizations, but as a long chain of adaptation. Each generation receives a landscape shaped by previous generations and passes a modified version to those who follow. The process is rarely intentional. Builders constructing houses seldom imagine future archaeologists examining their foundations. Merchants conducting business rarely expect discarded objects to become historical evidence. City planners solving immediate problems do not usually consider how their decisions might influence urban development centuries later. Yet those decisions accumulate. A road placed in a practical location continues attracting traffic. A marketplace encourages commercial activity. A water system shapes patterns of growth. Small choices become long-term influences. The hidden city beneath modern streets is therefore more than a collection of ruins. It is the physical record of countless ordinary decisions made over extraordinary spans of time. This realization helps explain why archaeology often feels simultaneously intimate and immense. The scale is vast. Entire civilizations are involved. Urban histories extend across millennia. Empires rise and fall, populations shift, landscapes transform. Yet the evidence frequently comes from individual lives. A repaired bowl, a worn tool, a child's toy, a doorway polished smooth by repeated use. The buried city preserves both perspectives at once. It records grand historical processes and ordinary human experiences within the same layers of soil and stone. Scholars still debate many aspects of these hidden worlds. The evidence remains incomplete. Entire districts lie inaccessible beneath modern development. Future discoveries will undoubtedly change current interpretations. New technologies will reveal features previously impossible to detect. The story is unfinished. In many ways, it has barely begun. Each construction project carries the possibility of discovery. Each excavation exposes another fragment of a larger landscape. Every buried structure hints at additional structures nearby. The hidden city continually expands as knowledge grows, and perhaps the most profound lesson of all concerns memory. Modern societies often think of the past as distant. History is placed in museums, books, documentary, and archaeological sites. It appears separated from daily life by centuries of change. The buried cities beneath modern urban centres challenge that assumption. The past is not always distant. Sometimes it lies only a few metres below the surface. Sometimes it supports the foundations of modern buildings. Sometimes it shapes the route of a familiar street. Sometimes it influences a neighbourhood's identity without anyone realising why. The boundary between past and present becomes less distinct than it first appears. Ancient cities are not merely predecessors of modern ones. They are part of the same landscape. Their remains continue affecting the world above them. Their infrastructure influences development. Their geography shapes decisions. Their traces survive in names, traditions, and patterns of movement. The hidden civilization never entirely disappears. It becomes embedded within the city that replaces it. This understanding transforms the way urban environments can be viewed. A busy avenue becomes more than a transportation route. It becomes one layer in a sequence stretching backward through time. A public square becomes more than an open space. It becomes part of a landscape shaped by generations of human activity. A modern skyline becomes more than a symbol of the present. It becomes the latest expression of a place continually reinventing itself. The city acquires depth, not only physical depth measured in meters of accumulated soil and construction debris, but historical depth measured in lives, communities, and civilizations. And beneath nearly every great city on Earth, that depth remains waiting. Waiting beneath pavement and concrete. Waiting beneath stations and towers. Waiting beneath homes, markets, offices, and roads. Waiting for the next excavation, the next discovery, the next glimpse into a forgotten world hidden beneath the familiar surface of the modern age. As the story draws to a close, the image that remains is not one of vanished cities standing alone in distant deserts or isolated ruins forgotten by time. It is a quieter image. A modern street at dusk. Lights glowing in apartment windows. People returning home after ordinary days. Traffic moving through familiar routes. Life continuing much as it always has. Beneath that street unseen in the darkness below may rest another street, and beneath that one perhaps another still. Generations separated by centuries occupy the same ground without ever meeting. They build, repair, celebrate, struggle, adapt, and leave traces behind. Most never imagine that future people will walk above them. Most assume their city is the city, yet history suggests otherwise. Cities are not fixed places. They are ongoing conversations between past and present. Every layer inherits something from those below. Every generation adds something of its own. Over time, the boundaries blur. Ancient worlds become foundations. Forgotten neighborhoods become invisible supports for newer ones. The past settles quietly beneath the present, rarely seen but never entirely gone. What survives in the record suggests that civilization is less fragile and more fragile than it first appears. Individual buildings disappear, governments collapse, empires fade, yet people return to rivers, harbours, crossroads, and fertile landscapes again and again. The locations endure even when the societies that once occupied them do not. The hidden cities beneath modern streets remind us that history is not only something remembered, it is something inhabited. Every road follows older decisions. Every neighborhood occupies a deeper story. Every city contains layers of human experience extending far beyond what is visible. And somewhere beneath countless modern streets, walls still stand in darkness. Forgotten rooms remain sealed. Ancient roads wait beneath layers of stone and concrete. Traces of lives once considered ordinary continue resting quietly below the noise of the present day. The cities above continue growing. The cities below continue waiting. And between them lies the long, uninterrupted story of humanity itself, written not only in books and memories but in the ground beneath our feet.